Do you worry about how to stay warm on a day like this when you're out backpacking? Come inside, sit by the fire, and we're going to talk about just that. I'm enjoying the first snowfall of the year here where I live in Colorado, and it's a beautiful day, but not a day that I want to hang around outside. So I thought it would be the perfect time to invite you in to join me by the fire and talk about how to stay warm when you're backpacking. Hey, buddy. Okay, hop down. Hop down. It's so nice to be inside and be warm and cozy by the fire on a cold day like today. When I first started backpacking, I remember being really terrified of hypothermia, even more so than the fear of bears that I had. I was scared that I was going to freeze to death at night in my tent because I just didn't really know how to keep myself warm. I did tons of research and I learned all kinds of tricks like eating a piece of candy before you go to bed to keep your metabolism going, or drinking something warm before you go to sleep can also help to kind of increase your body temperature. Maybe doing some jumping jacks, to get the blood flowing before you go to sleep. But I don't know about you, doing jumping jacks right before I go to sleep. My blood is flowing, then that maybe is not the most conducive thing to actually going to sleep. There are some other tricks that I'm going to share with you that will help you have a better night's sleep when you're out there in the backcountry and it is chilly and cold. Of course, it's nice if you can snuggle up with somebody in a tent at night, but in reality, there are a lot of us, and maybe you included, who like to backpack alone, and that means that you're probably camping alone as well. So how can you stay warm at night when the snow starts to fall or when the temperatures drop? And how can you stay safe while you're out there? One of the first things that you could do is go out and buy a warmer sleeping bag, right? And if you've got a 30-degree bag, that's great for, summer and into spring and fall. You might want to get a 0-degree bag, but I prefer some other strategies. I use a quilt instead of a sleeping bag, but my quilt is rated for about 17 degrees. Probably it's a 20-degree quilt that I added some extra down to when they were making it for me. It's a custom quilt. And so I think it comes down to about 17 degrees, even though it's not officially rated at that. So that's a fairly good comfort zone for most people most of the time. But in weather like this, when it's snowing and you're laying on the ground and the ground is cold, there are a lot of things that you can do to actually stay a little bit warmer. Since so much of your comfort and the temperature in your tent, the temperature of your body is going to be influenced by the ground that you're sleeping on, you want to have good insulation between yourself and the ground. You could buy a sleeping pad that's rated for really cold weather, and that's what I do. I use a Thermarest NeoAir X Therm, which is a super warm pad. Nemo has come out with a very warm pad as well, and having that extra insulation can make you more comfortable. If you've got a pad that is a less insulation, maybe it's like an R value of like 2.5, 3.5, something like that, you could just take a closed cell foam pad and put that under your sleeping pad as well, just for an extra layer, and that would save you having to buy a whole new sleeping pad. Those closed cell foam pads, they're only like, $40, $50. So they're a lot cheaper than a brand new ultralight sleeping pad. And it's something that you could carry just in the shoulder seasons or in the winter when you need it. If you've got a sleeping bag that's, say, 20 or 30 degrees, you can extend the comfort of that, extend the warmth of that by adding a sleeping bag liner. That's a lot cheaper than buying a whole new sleeping bag. So if you're on a budget, then a liner is the way to go. There are several different ones out there. There are some that are designed to add a lot of degrees of warmth, 15, 17 degrees, something like that. And there are some that only add a few degrees. I personally use a silk liner, and I really love it because it's comfortable, it's very lightweight to pack, and it actually keeps you cool in the summer and then keeps you warmer in the winter. And it adds about 7 degrees of warmth to my quilt that I use. I also have straps for my quilt that tuck it under the sleeping pad. With the sleeping bag liner, which you crawl into, and the straps around the quilt, I've got no drafts at all, really, as I'm sleeping, and so I'm able to stay really warm. A lot of us carry space blankets as a piece of emergency gear. Those little Mylar blankets, they're silver and shiny, and they're wonderful to have if there's an emergency and somebody maybe is going into shock and you need to wrap them in a blanket. They also do double duty underneath your sleeping pad. You can lay them on top of the tent floor, and that's going to reflect some heat back at you and also provide an extra barrier between the air coming up from the ground that might be kind of chilly. So for your sleep system, if you've got something underneath you, you've got a good warm pad or a supplement to your pad, like the closed cell foam. If you've got a good quality sleeping bag, if you've got a liner that's going to help you stay warm and you still find yourself chilly, or maybe you're just cold because you've been out and about on the campsite and you're getting ready to go to bed and you just feel chilled as you crawl into bed, you could take a Nalgene bottle and put some warm water in that, not boiling water, but warm water, close it up real tight and put that down inside your sleeping bag. Now that is something that I've heard a lot of people do. I honestly have not tried it because I'm a little paranoid about that bottle leaking. I have used hand warmers in the past, or foot warmers, and that's a good way to kind of warm up inside your sleeping bag a little bit. But do be cautious, because if you use hand warmers or foot warmers or any of those where they're chemicals and you break them and you shake them and that sort of thing, if they're up against your skin, they actually can cause burns. And I've seen that happen to people. So we'd be super careful. The smartest thing to do might be to put that down inside your sleeping bag, warm it up a little bit, and then maybe take it out or stick it in a pocket or something that it's insulated from your skin and not having direct contact with your skin, so that you don't get burned, because that would not be any fun and you don't want to ruin your trip. Having the right layers as far as what you sleep in makes a huge difference. And I find that if I wear a beanie and some gloves, I feel so much more comfortable, particularly because I've got Raynaud's, which is a circulatory disease where you tend to lose the feeling sometimes in your fingers, or, even I've had my nose get real tingly, or my feet. So having those gloves and good socks and a beanie can help in those areas where maybe you're not well covered, or where you tend to lose a lot of body heat. Now, you probably don't want to sleep in your hiking socks when you get into camp at night, especially when it's cold, because, well, number one, they may be damp from being on your feet and sweating as you hike, but they're also probably going to be a little bit tighter than what I would recommend for sleep socks. It's really important that you have circulation and air around your hands and your feet. As that air warms up, that's going to create an air pocket that helps you to stay warmer. If you wear gloves that are too tight, if you wear socks that are too tight, they're going to take away that little layer of air, and they're also going to impede your circulation, so that you're not going to have as much blood flow to those extremities, and you're going to find that you feel colder at night. And as far as a beanie, if you have something that will stay on your head, you might want a chin strap so that it's not falling off as you roll around, particularly if you are sleeping with a quilt. A lot of sleeping bags have a little place where you can put your pillow and you can kind of wrap it around your head, which is nice, but quilts may not have that. So if you're using a quilt, you definitely want to have something on your head to keep your head warm. If you're getting a custom quilt and they have the option for the draft collar, that might also help to keep you warm. If your tent is too big, you might find that you're using a two-person tent because you like the extra space, but when it comes to winter time, it's cold. And that is because you have to warm up the air inside the tent. And even though that fabric is really thin, it does make a difference. So I find when I'm using a single, one-person tent, that I tend to be a lot warmer than I am in a two-person tent. Or even if I go camping and I have a bigger tent, I'm chilly. So I tend to take the smallest tent possible in more inclement weather, so that I don't get really cold or don't spend a lot of time when I first go to sleep trying to warm up the inside of the tent. Humidity is also going to make a difference in terms of how you feel. And I have made this mistake, so I'm cautioning you not to do the same thing. Using that space blanket, if you put it over your sleeping bag or over your quilt, as your body is releasing moisture during the night, and we do lose a lot of moisture as we sleep, if you have that impermeable layer over your clothes, over your sleeping bag, then you're more likely to find that those things are damp in the morning. And I actually woke up and found that I had frost all over my quilt, and it was because of humidity. If you want to use that emergency blanket, it's better to use it underneath your sleeping pad versus on top of you, even though that might seem counterintuitive, because you're like, oh, I don't want all my heat to escape. It's going to happen. Your body is going to release heat. Hopefully it will stay contained within your clothes and within your sleeping bag, and you'll be comfortable. But if you start to sweat, if you start to get moisture that builds up, especially if you've got something like that space blanket over the top, then you're going to feel even more cold because you have that dampness. There's not a whole lot you can do about ambient humidity, but it is good to make sure that you have warm clothes, particularly wool clothes will keep you warm even when they're damp. So if you think it's going to be rainy or humid or snowy and you're worried about things getting wet, take wool layers to sleep in instead of synthetic layers. And I do that all the way from the early fall into late spring, because lots of times when you're out camping, the temperatures are going to dip at night. And I just feel that I'm more comfortable that way. If I'm warm, I can kind of throw off my quilt, or I could just even sleep in the sleeping bag liner instead of the quilt, and just pull that up if I get cooler. But I find that the wool layers are extremely versatile. I also wear wool socks. And like I said, they're a little bit looser than what I wear for hiking in the daytime, and they're in my pack. And all those clothes are packed up in a place where they're not going to get wet during the daytime. So as I put them on in the evening, I'm going to be nice and dry and warm. If you find that your sleep clothes are not warm enough and you've got a puffy, you may want to sleep in that as well. Or I've got a Mountain Hardwear fleece that I use, and that keeps me really warm. I use my puffy, actually, I cover my hips because I tend to get cold around my hips more than anywhere else. So if I'm putting on the puffy, it's usually right around my hips instead of being worn. So that's another way to just sort of add some layers. And you could even sleep in your hiking clothes on top of your sleep clothes if you need to, if you feel like you're too cold. Now, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you gotta go, a lot of people are like, no, it's cold. I don't want to get out of my tent. It's too cold. But the best thing you can do is actually just make it quick, get up and go, because your body is actually trying to keep that urine that's in your bladder, it's trying to keep it warm. It's trying to keep that to 98.6 degrees, right? And that's a lot of energy. If you just go ahead, get out of the tent real quick, go pee and come back, then your body is not having to keep all that fluid warm, and it can keep your extremities warm instead. So those are my best quick tips for how to stay warm in the winter when you're backpacking. I would love to hear from you if you've got some additional tips, anything that you think I forgot, anything that you have tried that didn't work, let me know. You can just drop a note down in the comments below, and I will look forward to seeing you here again next time.